Okay, we are live. Wow. All right. Well, hello and welcome to Task and Purpose Live. I am Paul Zolger. I'm the editor in chief of Task and Purpose. And today we're speaking with our guest, Colonel Andy Milburn, a former Marine Special Operations commander who retired after 31 years of service. He's currently on assignment for Task and Purpose covering the war in Ukraine. So far, actually, I was still going to keep introducing you, but I'm just going to stop there and say, hey, Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Paul, great to be here. And so I'll hello everyone who's listening out there. As Paul mentioned, I'm in Kyiv, and just to kind of set the scene here. Although probably about estimates vary, but anything between 80% of the city has evacuated. There is among those who are remaining, the atmosphere really has changed for the better in the last 2 or 3 days. It just seems there's an air of optimism, whereas previously it was kind of fear, almost dread. But now there's a feeling that Kiev may come out of this okay, that the country may come out of it okay. And I think I wrote an article, not the last one, but the one before, just saying that overconfidence or complacency might be one of the biggest threats here now. And a lot of people vilified me. I'm smiling because I know we've had this conversation about how bitter it is out there in Twitter and LinkedIn. But if you express an opinion, you've got to expect people to pile in on you. And so I got millions of lectures. But my point is this: that it has obviously the Ukrainians have fought very well, and I'll explain. I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm trying to avoid being what I call today a suburban Malky. And so, my comments, I'm going to pitch them. So I hope they're interesting for the audience. Some of the unusual aspects of this conflict, rather than simply, reenact what has happened. But anyway, so they have defended very well, obviously. But the point is this, and this is why I meant that time is, in a sense, on the Russian side, which is unusual for an occupying power. But as long as there are Russian troops on Ukrainian soil, outside Donbass and Luhansk, this won't be a frozen conflict. There's so much at stake, so much bitterness. So many lives lost on the Russian side. There's a sense of national angst and pride, I'm sure, and other people can write about that more than I. But the Ukrainians know that there's no ceasefire that they can call victory. And life will not go on unless they fully expel the Russians. And that's where the real challenge is, because, as most of your listeners know, going on the offense requires quite a bit more than fighting a successful defense on internal lines, in your own countryside with people supporting you. It's very much a home game. Going on the offense means larger unit movements, maneuvers. To this point, the strength of the Ukrainian defense has been small unit. Here in the city, there are, what we'd call squads of men and women, who commute to the war. They get in their own POVs, cars, and load them up with anti-tank weapons, and off they go. And they're doing very well. Sorry.
I want to get into that. I want to get into that a little bit later, and I appreciate you bringing that up. But just to back up just a little bit and set the stage for some people who may be joining us who are not yet familiar with your work and what you've been doing so far. Andy has written 3 dispatches from the war zone thus far for Task and Purpose, one of which describes the disastrous early start of the Ukrainian Foreign Legion that brought untrained and unprepared recruits into the battlefield. Other pieces, he talked about the Russian military adapting its tactics. And most recently, you had an analysis using your own experience of fighting a full scale, what a large scale urban battle looks like with your own experience in Fallujah and Mosul, and provided a preview of what lies ahead if the Russian military launches a full scale ground attack into Kyiv, which would be an urban brawl, not seen since the Second World War. Can you talk a little bit about your most recent piece and
Yeah, absolutely.
what that kind of looks like from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the curious things about this is the fact that Putin could have even thought that taking Kiev would be relatively easy. Kiev's a city of about, it's over 300,000 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, the battle for Mosul in 2017, 2018, with the Iraqi security forces backed by the full weight of U.S. Fires, took 9 months, and it was a hard slog, very casualty intensive. Mosul is maybe a quarter of the size of this city. Fallujah is about a tenth of the size of this city, and Fallujah, I know from personal experience, took 14,000 coalition troops against insurgent presence of estimates vary, but probably around 2,000, 2,500, and that took 2 months. And again, was even with everything on our side, was very casualty intensive, and we were very well trained. You're talking Marines who'd been through urban training, good morale, et cetera, et cetera. Very, a far cry from what we're hearing about Russian soldiery. And there's a toll on the psyche too in urban combat. It's one thing fighting out in the open; it's another having to go in and clear building after building, just not knowing what's around the corner. It kind of it activates this kind of visceral childhood nightmare scenario, right? You just don't know what's around the corner, and you can imagine doing that again and again. But so even if the Russians had enough troops to do that, this would be a really, really hard slog. And the Ukrainians know the city; they know every nook and cranny. The people defending the city are the people who live here. It's not like they put a unit from the Ukrainian army defending Kiev. It is a territorial defense force by and large, who are locals, many of whom volunteered in the last few months. Not a great deal of military experience. What they do have is an absolute zeal to defend their homes and throw the Russians back. And so they've learned things very quickly. How to handle an anti-tank weapon, and they've learned a lot of things just are now unfortunately by trial and error, taking casualties, and Russians, as I mentioned, have adapted their tactics accordingly. So you've got this kind of stalemate in a sense. Russians keep probing, trying to get into the city itself. They're in the outskirts right now, in the north and the west, and the Ukrainians are conducting platoon, squad level counterattacks, essentially. And this causes a lot of frustration for all the armchair Clausewitzes out there who want to wake up in the morning and see, a static red line on their computers and be able to say, the Russians are still holding on to Irpin and are still in Bovary, and talk knowledgeably about it. But even Ukrainian senior officers do not know. I couldn't tell you at any given time exactly who is where, and that's just the nature of fluid combat, mechanized combat especially. But anyway, getting back to your point, so Putin's choice, right? So he doesn't have a choice of taking the city by putting guys in. He does not have the manpower. Again, even if his guys were really well trained, which they're not, and the morale was high, which invariably it cannot be. It wasn't to begin with, and now it must be. We're hearing it's rock bottom. Because the rule of thumb when you're clearing a city is one city block of about 2-story buildings will suck up an entire battalion. No, I'm sorry, 3 city blocks. One city block will be a company. So you can imagine 500,000 structures. You're talking. This is probably a job for 200,000 to 250,000 troops to move in and fight for and hold this city. And that's even with not a very determined defense. That's even if they were just dealing with, guerrillas running around taking pot shots. But it's a very different scenario
Right.
because they're getting hit hard. So his other option is to encircle the city, which he has been trying to do, and starve it out, a la Mariupol, and the way that the Russians have done in cities in Syria. That's kind of their forte, right? Because with badly trained troops and mechanized infantry who don't like to leave their vehicles, you want to compensate with firepower and just crush the city. So far, the air defenses, though, have held out here. What I'm saying is they're stopping more missiles that are getting through. It's been a very coherent defense. The Ukrainian Air Force is doing incredible work. They just night before last, they shot down a Russian aircraft here in the suburbs, and that's quite a regular occurrence. So even if he can physically encircle, his job is going to be a really difficult one. Typically in a siege, water is what gives out first, right? You think all the way back to Megiddo, Masada, the ancient Israelis fighting the rebellion against the Romans. It was water that forced them, that really enabled the Romans to force them out. The Romans controlled the water source. Same thing in Mariupol. You're reading they've run out of water. Here there's a river running through the city. There are wells interspersed around. There's one right opposite my apartment here, which people go out and fill up the water jugs every day. There's a metro system that people can shelter in from the shelling. It's not going to take, if you're in a station, it's not going to take a direct hit from a KH-101, cruise missile, but nevertheless, it provides incredible amount of protection. Food supplies are enough here, I'm told, by the Ukrainian military to last several months. So even if he can launch a siege, it'll be a long drawn out affair. And of course, he's just, I won't comment on his geopolitical position, but it's not enviable right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. When you talk to the pundits, you'll see all kinds of things from chemical, biological attack, which is always a concern. I would say that's unlikely here in Kyiv, and I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong. If next time I appear, it's in a great green cloud with me coughing and gasping. But there's, who knows? No one can predict what Putin. Here we are. It's a loser's game trying to predict what he's going to do. But my point is that if he's going to use chem, I would guess it's going to be in the south against a place like Mariupol, where it's not quite as iconic, and the lines are very close, and you can even blame it on the Ukrainians, right? Saying they launched it and it blew back on them, and that's kind of the Russian way. But I could be wrong, I submit that. So the other thing is, the only other way, what he has in country isn't enough to get him to victory. Not at all. In fact, he's going to have trouble holding on to what he has. But if he does manage to find enough troops within Russia, or even if Belarus steps in, it's conceivable, certainly. And he launches a direct attack from Belarus down into Kyiv, well supported by fast support, especially if he focuses on, I'm saying the Russian military focuses on taking key nodes out of the Ukrainian IAT system. It's a good system, but it's not, it's not like really cutting it. It's not like the S-400. So it's conceivable that he will have success there, combined with an attack out of Belarus. But it would still be a hard grind. But I'm just saying that then the Ukrainians would be in trouble. Kyiv would be in trouble if that happened. I wouldn't make a prediction that it would fall anytime soon. Remember, these events are long urban fights take a long time. Think about Leningrad. Ironically, Putin's family uh, went through the siege of Leningrad. In fact, his older brother was killed during the siege. Not many people know that. I happen to, because I'm a sad individual and pick up irrelevant facts. So he's well aware. He's got to be well aware, but the guy's obviously deluded, and so it doesn't matter. We can talk about his history when we want, but it's not.
So I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Ukrainian troops. Obviously, without compromising their operational security, it's a legitimate concern. What can you tell us about Ukrainian forces in Kyiv? You mentioned they're commuting to and from the front
Yeah.
lines. Are they pushing out on patrols to sort of test Russian lines?
Yeah.
Are they actively taking back ground, or is it more of holding on to what they have?
No, they've been conducting a mobile small unit defense. Here's the strange thing. I love this paradox. So when we used to come, when I say we, I mean, so I've been coming to Ukraine on and off for 15 years. I came here as a Marine infantryman, training Ukrainians down in the Crimea, and then most recently, a couple of years ago, they're south in Mykolaiv, which is under attack right now. And the good ones are always really good, but there was always kind of as there is in any military, but here perhaps more pronounced. The 20% who are just like, oh, we don't need to know this, we know everything, and they would sleep in the back of the classroom. What everyone tells me to a man and woman here is that all those kind of dopey, kind of lazy guys really have stepped up to the plate. They've been galvanized. And so, to your point, everything about the Ukrainian military, well, a lot of things about the Ukrainian military would be anathema to us. You see a lot of pudgy guys with beards. It's a little like the Israeli military. They don't look good in uniform. But the bottom line is they have learned quickly, adapted quickly, and this style of warfare just fits with their national culture. They don't necessarily like being told what to do, and the huge hierarchical units, and they all have horror stories about Soviet times and how draconian and lockstep the army was. But now, simply because they have to, command and control has devolved down to small unit leaders. They are executing mission command like we never have. The United States, when we come here, we criticize them all the time for, there's too much Soviet in you guys. But now, when the chips are down and they don't have they just can't exercise a coherent national command and control process. It's down to small unit leaders, battalion commanders and lower, and they're doing great work. So for the counterattack today, I was talking to actually a Ukrainian general who's in charge of the defense here, and he's like, "Yeah, I give orders to my brigade commanders. I just say, hey, just keep finding where the enemy is, and just messing with him, just slowing him down, and that's the only mission order. There's no real coherent fire support process. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing, but it's working. It's working because at the ground level, and you can just see it when these guys, when you talk to them, they get in their cars and take off north. They're very they're determined, and the morale is high. And again, you can imagine it. Paul, where are you from?
I'm from Connecticut originally.
Okay, but are you from a city?
Not really. Small town.
Okay, you should have prepped me better. But even your small town, you can imagine. Even if you hated every moment of your time in the Marine Corps, which I'm sure you did. I mean, if the Russians were coming into your small town, thoughts about all those things that plague units when we serve overseas, kind of for that that feeling of, hey, why are we here? And this sucks, blah, blah, blah. Go out the window. That's your home, and so it makes perfect sense, but it's really, it's moving to see. And, I'm cautious about getting caught up in the propaganda here. But the truth is, yeah, these guys are showing tremendous courage. There is also, I've noticed, it's very interesting. The Russians have become victims, victims in the Ukrainians' eyes. No longer, it's almost intangible. But in the last few days, they've gone from being occupiers, invaders, to victims. And that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians feel sympathy for them. It just kind of incites their bloodlust as far as, hey, we've got nothing to fear. These guys are wusses, and we're going to kick them out. The Ukrainian general today said to me, they're fighting in the 20th century. And it is true. They outdated equipment. It's extraordinary. I mean, when we read about the Russian army reforms, it was a paper tiger, since Georgia. But I think, and again, I'm on thin ice here, so I'm sure there are political analysts who know more than me. But the problem is this: you've got a military that's controlled by an intelligence agency. The FSB has complete oversight over the Russian army, and so all the things that make a military good, subordinate initiative, focused on mission command tactics, professionalism, all those things have gone out the window. And so you have like the worst of the Soviet era. Last thing, I'll just finish with an anecdote. So I was talking to a colonel yesterday. There's nothing worse than a colonel who wants to get back in the front lines, right? So this guy, he goes out patrolling with his guys. He went out for a 2 or 3 day kind of rampage, I suppose, with a platoon. So you're wondering, I hope he didn't take command of that platoon as a colonel. But anyway, he tagged onto a platoon. And you've got to take his stories with a pinch of salt, although he's, generally a very honest guy. But, he's saying, yeah, we destroyed like 6, 7 tanks, killed 100 people. But my point, what really stuck on that story was, they hit, he was telling me they executed an ambush, hit the lead vehicle, and all the other Russians piled out of their APCs and tanks and surrendered. And so there's this small patrol looking at, maybe a company of Russians surrendering. And this guy's telling me they're wearing Soviet era uniforms. They're wearing the old, like the jack boots, and they're poorly equipped, and, it's just dreadful state. And so he said, we can't take prisoners anymore. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm about to hear a horrible story. I was like, I don't want to hear this. And he said, no, we just told them, put down your weapons and walk back to Russia. And I said, wow, aren't you worried about them like being given another weapon and put back into circulation? And he said, no, they're done. They, the equivalent of they're done training. They could come back into Ukraine, but those dudes weren't ready to fight anymore. And that's kind of the prevailing opinion. I was talking to another guy, an American actually, who said, yeah, they have come face to face at times with Russians who are just simply saying, don't shoot, So I think, yeah, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. What I hopefully am giving you listeners is kind of an insight into the way the war is being fought. And the problem with us Americans is that we want to always put things in compartments, right? Hey, this is the way you fight a war. And we are, despite our protestations, we are absolutely not culturally aligned with mission command. We have a very hierarchical organization. So ironically, you have this Eastern European country that is really executing small unit tactics in the way that we aspire to. So there's going to be a lot to be learned from here.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I'd like to pivot to some other aspects of combat that don't really get as much of much of its due. We talk a lot about firefights and battles and direct ground assaults and things like that, but let's talk about cyber, electronic warfare, signals
Yeah.
intelligence. Many have noticed that the much hyped Russian cyber capabilities that we all know about. They've not been really brought to bear in this conflict, and the question being asked is why.
Yeah, Paul, I can't answer that specific question. All I can do is speculate. And in that, I will separate myself from all, Twitter land where everyone knows the answer. So,
Which I very much enjoy.
so speculation, okay? The, remember my comment about the FSB dominating the army? And so you see the Russians very bad at operations. They were better at operations. They would combine cyber operations, uh, but they haven't. But the FSB, remember, is focused on collection. So there's a reason, I think, why the cell phone towers are still operating and the internet's still operating and things haven't been shut down cyber wise. I think the Russians are picking up a fair amount, a lot, from the Ukrainians. I'm sure they are. The Ukrainians don't have covered communications, which is, something that we're trying to get them. But so I don't know. I don't think it's that anything broke down in Russians' cyber capability. I suspect that there's some wrangling going on, and the FSB is kind of controlling that and saying no, we can do better by allowing them free communication. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Oh, hey, here's
absolutely.
the other thing, Paul. So cyber, right? So when we're talking about cyber, and we're talking really about uh, non-kinetic effects against infrastructure, which which would have a very superficial effect now because when I'm sorry, infrastructure is the wrong term, but for instance, banking systems, um, the the military's overall command and control system, but it doesn't affect tactical actions. Well, happens to benefit the Ukrainians that they really don't have an overall coherent command and control system, and all the banks are closed. So what are the Russians going to do with cyber now? What they can do is in the electromagnetic spectrum is do a lot of jamming, and they are doing that, and it is frustrating the Ukrainians. For the Ukrainian side, uh, what they lack, you probably heard a ton of things, so I'll break it down. But what they really lack is the ability to perform in the electromagnetic spectrum at the tactical level. Jammers, right? They lack jammers. They lack also signals intelligence collection equipment. So that puts them a little bit of a disadvantage. But on the other hand, what they do have, they're using to great effect. They're very savvy in that spectrum and in multi-domain operations. I would say this is another observation. Actually, now I think about it, the Ukrainians are better at multi-domain operations than most U.S. units. What I mean by that is, hey, you've seen their actions in the information realm, right? And I know there's been accusations with some justification that they've bumped against the parameters of the law of armed conflict, but nevertheless, they are really efficient with information operations, integrating them fully in a way that we struggle to do. Um, they're very good. They understand the importance of drones, of sensors at the lowest level. All these things that I think our guys, I know our guys struggle with, because we're still locked into the close with fire and destroy by fire maneuver, um, but the Ukrainians are truly in the 21st century when it comes to that, and that has given them an edge. They just could use some more, more equipment.
Let's talk about that. That was actually a really good segue, because my
Mm.
next question was to ask what the Ukrainians need.
Yeah,
From the perspective of the Ukrainian military,
yeah.
what do they need next in your opinion? What gear and equipment are crucial in this fight against the Russians?
Hey, so I'm gonna pat myself on the back, Paul, and I don't do that much, but because you pay me so pitifully, I have to pat myself on the back because that's all I can do. But you remember, so I wrote an article for your publication, and I mentioned switchblades, right? I said, hey, that's an awesome weapon, because switchblades give at the squad level the ability to the long range precision fires. I mean, relatively long range precision fires at the squad level. It's one of the few weapon systems that does. It's a loitering munition, right? It's maybe $1,000 a round as opposed to whatever $70,000 a javelin. So I said, why aren't we giving them switchblade? This all this news about javelin, but that's what they need. And I'd love to say this was me who influenced it. Who knows? But the U.S. government announced that they're going to give them switchblades. So they
Yeah,
retasked the purpose, Paul. That is why you need to double my salary.
I
Anyway,
think so.
um,
Absolutely.
so switchblades, yeah, that's going to be a game changer here. Only if they get switchblades in sufficient quantity, and of course trainers too, which is kind of the long pole, because when NATO or the United States says, "Hey, just send your guys into Poland, we'll train them there," you want to go, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. They're at war. What do you think they're going to do? Like pull dudes off the line to go to Poland? It's a 2-day trip to get to Poland. And then how are they going to disseminate that knowledge that they picked up there? So the training that happens has to occur here in country. Kiev is a great location closer, but yeah, Switchblade, drones. The drones they have, a lot of, I mean, everyone's gone, a lot of people have become very masturbatory about all the drone footage on YouTube. But the bottom line is that, yeah, they've got the TB2, but they only had a handful of them. And you will notice that those videos have dropped off. And the reason is that they have no mid range drones now, or very few. And they're kind of their Puma equivalent, their short range drones, are subject to Russian interference because they're Chinese made,
Hmm.
DJ-1. So they need drones. And that's, yeah. And here's something I learned. This is very geeky, but uh, there's a huge disparity in price between short range and mid range drones. So we could get, or they could purchase, short range drones for good kit for about $20,000, but mid range are about almost $500,000. So there's a lot of money involved. The Ukrainian government doesn't have money. There's a flood of equipment coming in, but they're having to sort through what they really need. And there is I'm just relaying a complaint. They are getting a lot of stuff they don't need, and they are very frustrated that they feel no one's listening to what they do need. And so when they say, "Hey, we need mid-range drones," sending a bunch of Raytheon or execs to Warsaw, to try and sell them this stuff is not the way to go. Um, let me see. Secure communications. All right, this is not a boring topic. These guys are talking on cell phones. When they realized the Russians could geolocate them very quickly and call in artillery fire, they have switched to signal. But signal, as you know, is intermittent, has a lag often, and so yeah, they're fighting this war on kind of garage on garage sale gear. Uh, they don't have secure. I'm not even talking encrypted. I'm talking secure radios. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Um,
We Andy, we have some comments in here, and I do want to go to the audience here and get some of those questions answered here. And I'm gonna probably get you into speculative pundit mode here with this one question from Mallory on Facebook, but um, she wants to know how this ends. You know what? Actually, I guess it's Scott Stalker sends. But how do you see this ending? You know, what is this going to turn into a Cold War, frozen conflict, a long period of time, or something different? Or you know, I mean, and if this is unanswerable at this point, you know, obviously
um,
that's fine. What do you see there?
I think conclusively it's unanswerable. I can tell you after things that I've seen in the last 2 days, I am I am more confident than I was a week ago that they will be able to expel the Russians. But what I'm trying to what I'm trying to picture is the point of pain at which the Russians will take such a humiliating political decision as to withdraw. Um, it's a dilemma, right? So if the conflict stopped right now, I think the Ukrainians would be the losers if lines held. Of course, they would. If I mean, they've got a Russian occupation force on their territory. If status quo is maintained, um, but I I'm more confident because I can see their plan to evict uh, the Russians, and it's a good plan. It might not be the combined arms, roaring across the Fulda Gap type plan that U.S. planners would put together, but their plan is a Ukrainian plan, and they're making it work, and it's formidable, I think, and so they will inflict severe pain on the Russians, uh, incomprehensible pain. I mean, when you think about, and I'm not talking about the eastern provinces. I'm talking about the regions up by the border. You think about it. All the locals there, even if they were even the Russian speakers, by and large, are now anti-Russian. It's extraordinary, and they are helping, the resistance movement. So, and you know this. I mean, think about our own experiences in Afghanistan. It's it's hard to imagine the Russians being able to hold on here at some point. And I think it all hinges on how long Putin stays in power. It really
Hmm.
does, because they, right now, in the occupied areas in the north. I'm not talking about right here in the northern outskirts of Kiev, where they're still trying to attack in. But in the areas where they've kind of gone firm, they have they they've done that. They've gone purely defensive. They've laid minefields by the sides of the roads, which is was unprecedented here and is causing civilian casualties. And so, but the point is that they're settling in behind these defensive barriers. Um, so they are, they've lost initiative. But on the other hand, at what level of pain before they decide to give up, or before Putin does?
Yeah.
It's it's a no-win, right? It really is.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thanks so much for you've been very generous with your time today, and I think we're gonna have just one last question for you. I think it's probably one of the questions that's really on most people's minds, and the question is really what's next. Recently, you spoke with a Ukrainian general, and you asked him, you know, what he thought the Russians were going to do next and I'd like if I'd like you to share what did he tell you?
Um, they are really concerned about a chemical attack. They're concerned about two things: chemical attack around Mariupol, um, like a false flag attack, blaming it on the Ukrainians. So releasing chem and then saying, "Oh, hey, that was the Ukrainians who did it," and it just blew back on them. And the other thing they're concerned about is Belarus. They don't trust, understandably, Belarus, and they think that Putin is trying to is planning to launch an attack from there with Belarusian troops, because there's been a lot of news in the media about, well, he's run out of manpower, et cetera, et cetera. Well, no, actually, he hasn't. Even I get it. Even the 10% losses of total forces here. I mean, they're staggering losses. But on the other hand, I hate to say this, but the Russians are culturally inured to heavy losses. I mean, look back to the Second World War. I mean, the Russians lost, and people criticize my numbers here, but at least 20 million, conservative estimate, right? I mean, so I'm not making light of their casualties. I'm just saying that they have shown, whether it was a communist regime or now Putin, which is kind of an unprecedented experience, a willingness to take that kind of pain because they're not answerable the way we are. So it would be wrong to mirror image, I guess, is what I'm saying, Paul. Yeah, I mean, if this was the U.S., of course, I mean, we would be, the government would have been gone. I mean, you can't imagine. I mean, look at, see the reports of like 40,000 killed, wounded, or missing. At the most conservative estimates, Russian admission of 10,000 dead. They only lost 15,000. Well, not only, but they lost 15,000 guys in 10 years in Afghanistan, and they've lost, by their admission, 10,000 in 1 month here. I mean, it's just staggering, isn't it? Those are, it's First World War casualties. Yeah, so it's really, I think that's why we're finding out so hard. And those who claim that they know what's going to happen are full of it, frankly, because this is unprecedented in every respect.
Well, I think I speak for all of us here at Task and Purpose, and many of the people who are wishing you well in the comments section, saying so. I think we trust that you'll bring us to the news and what's going on the ground, and I think that's where we'll leave it there for now. You can read all of Andy's dispatches at taskandpurpose.com. Be sure to follow him on Twitter. He is at Andy Milburn 8 or Milburn AR on Instagram. And also, please follow Task and Purpose on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, YouTube as well, for the latest news and views from the battlefield to the barracks. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again, Andy. Hope you stay safe out there.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Paul. All the best to you guys. Take care.